Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of Smart Money on CNBC TV 18. Now this week it's a part of our two-part series of retirement planning. Remember last week we spoke with a veteran in this space, Monica Halan, and this week we're taking our retirement planning discussion forward with another guest, Chirag Muni, who's the Associate Director at Anand Rathi Wealth Management. Chirag, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You know, last week when we spoke with Monica Halan, she did indicate to us that it is very essential to start planning for retirement early, purely because A, you can build a bigger nest egg, B, you can use the power of compounding to your advantage, and you can, live a stress-free life, right, post the age of 40 and 50. But you tell us, getting down to the, the bare details and the, not the why, but the how to plan for your retirement. Tell us exactly, how should one really go about it? I mean, what are the first few steps that one should think of when looking at retirement?
Thank you, Sonia. So, when you look at retirement planning, I think you have to look at it from two perspectives. One is when you start to plan, you need to know how far away you are from your retirement. And post-retirement, how much you are likely to live. Now, let me give you some numbers. So the average retirement age for most Indians is about 60 years, especially the salaried ones. And the life expectancy, of course, the published data is about 70 years, but most healthy people live about 75, 80 years, which means you have almost 15, 20 years more post your retirement that you'll have to, live off with the corpus that you build, which automatically means that you'll have to plan much, much earlier. Of course, most often and not, people would say that you have to, start as early as you start working. But let's be practical. Most often and not, you don't start thinking of retirement when you're just starting a job or you started working. So I think 15, 20 years just before retirement is a very good age. Maybe 40 years of age is the right age, and latest could be around 50 years age, because you have to give some time to your savings to grow at least at the pace of inflation. So that's something that I would say. The second thing that you have to look at specifically when you're starting to plan for your retirement is what is your inflation rate. You have to pen down all the expenses that you're currently doing, and if you have to live the same lifestyle post 60, then you have to add the inflation rate to it and see that what kind of expenses are you going to do at the age of 60. So let me give you an example. Let's take three cases. Let's say today somebody who's at 40, 45 and 50, which means the 40-year-old person has 20 years to go for retirement. The 45-year-old has about 15 years and the 50-year-old person has about 10 years to go for retirement. Now, let's take an example. Let's say each of them today have a monthly household expense of about 1 lakh, which means annually he's spending 12 lakhs on the items that he's consuming. Now, you have to just put an inflation number, let's say an average inflation number of about 7%. It just means that at the end of, at the age of retirement, which is 60, this 12 lakh equivalent is nothing but 46 lakhs for the person who's starting at 40. The person who's starting at 45 will require about 33 lakhs, and the person who's starting at 50 will require 23 lakhs. Now, the important point is not to get bogged down by these numbers, because you've just added the inflation rate. If you just do a calculation as to what pace of rate of growth you need to have and what kind of savings that I'll require. So if you see for the 40-year-old guy, the savings that would be required is about 1.2 lakhs. For the 45-year-old guy, it will be 1.5 lakhs. And for the 50-year-old guy, it will be about 2 lakhs. So, it looks that the 40-year-old guy has to have a higher number, but at the end of the day, he has to set aside a lesser number for his corpus, because it's 20 years to go for his retirement. So two key messages: please determine the inflation which is relevant to you, and not what the government publishes, because you may have a different lifestyle than what the average government publishes at about 5-6%. Somebody would have 7, somebody would have 10. So right inflation number is very important. And the second is, the earlier you start is better it is, because you have to set aside a lesser corpus.
Okay, this is actually a very helpful table, and it's coming up for our viewers on the screen. So I just want to, because I'm not too far away from 40 as well, so I just want to put that on board once again. You're saying that if I invest 1.2 lakhs per month starting at the age of 40, by the time I retire, I will have a corpus of around 9.2 crores, considering the inflation rate at 7%. Is that the right way to look at it?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
But that
got
of course
that.
taken
So,
into
oh, yeah, go ahead.
it's taken into account, a 10% rate of, growth on your investments. Why 10%? I'll come to it. But you need to have you need to have a return
Yeah.
objective little more than the inflation, and so that you have a buffer, so that you're secured by the time you're 60.
Okay, great. So that makes me very hopeful that, perhaps if I start now itself, I'll have this 10 crore of retirement corpus. All I have to do is invest 1 lakh, and you're taking a reasonable rate of growth, right? About a 10% returns. Now tell me, what are the investments I would have to make to achieve this retirement corpus?
Absolutely. So, like I said, let's say your inflation rate that you have determined for yourself is 7%. The first step is to have a return objective, which is more than 7%, because you have to keep in mind certain contingencies, the tax liabilities on the products that you buy, or maybe unexpected rise in inflation itself over the next 20 years period. So, to have a good 10% objective is very important. Now, to do that, the first step is the asset allocation decision. Now, again, let me take the same case of 40, 45, and 50-year-old. I think for a 40-year-old, since he has 20 years to go for retirement, the ideal asset mix would be 80% equity and 20% debt. For 45-year-old, it will be 70 and 30, and for the 50-year-old, it will be 60-40. I think that's the right asset mix. Now, within that, of course, then comes what kind of products can I buy? Because there are several 15, 16 type of products that you can have today, which are long-term retirement products. You have stocks, mutual funds, FDs, insurance, so many things. But when we evaluate on the basis of risk, return, taxation, cost of the investment itself, and liquidity, from the equity portion, I would say mutual funds are hands down, beat all of them. Having a good set of 8, 10 diversified mutual funds, large cap, mid cap, and a little bit of flexi cap funds would do the trick on the equity side. On the debt side, on the defensive asset classes, I would say you can have a 5% diversification to gold, but in the form of sovereign gold bond funds, because that gives an additional 2.5% return, and it's backed by the RBI. So 5% goes to gold, and rest of the 15%, if you have EPF, then nothing like it, because that's the best debt instrument you can have. But in case you're not salaried, then that could be a mix of NPS, PPF, and maybe some debt mutual funds. I think that's the right product mix for a 40-year-old guy. For a 45-year-old guy, I would say it's 70-30. So 70 is again equity funds. The 30%, like I said, 5% gold, and rest of the 25%, if not EPF, in NPS and PPF and debt mutual funds. And for the 50-year-old, the choice is a little limited. 60% goes in equity. 40%, the rest of the 40%, 5% goes in gold. The 35% should ideally go into debt mutual funds or NPS, because PPF is a 15-year product and he doesn't have that much time, and it has its limitations in terms of how much you can contribute. So I think this is the right asset mix and the product mix that you can have.
Okay, and what are the tax implications for these investment ideas? I mean, you gave us a whole host of, investment arena, whether it's like debt mutual funds, equity mutual funds, but can you take us through what the tax implications will be when I sort of take out this money post-retirement?
Okay, so let me go product by product. Of course, equity mutual funds, the taxation is long-term capital gains under Section 112. That will be 10%. After a year. Debt mutual funds, more than 3 years, 20% taxation with indexation. So that's a great benefit you can have, because you can add the cost of inflation, what the government publishes, and that brings down your tax liabilities. So that's for debt mutual funds. When it comes to PPF, all your maturity proceeds and your interest is completely tax-free. So that's advantage you have as per Section 10, 11, 10, 12. When it comes to NPS, before 60 years, anyways, you cannot, take back your money. But at the end of 60 years, you can get 60% of the money, which is almost tax-free, and 40% of the money is actually converted into an annuity, which you get a regular income. That is fully taxable. And lastly, the sovereign gold bond fund, which comes for a period of 8 years. The taxation there is if you're there till the maturity, the taxation is completely free, but the 2.5% that you get interest is fully taxable. And for sovereign gold bond funds, of course, as soon as it's issued, it's also listed on an exchange. So if you if you exit it prematurely on the exchange, then it could be a 10% taxation more than a year.
Okay, I just had one follow-up question on the taxation when you withdraw your PPF, that is your Public Provident Fund. If you don't withdraw for a critical illness or for children's education, you need to withdraw it for some other purpose. What would the taxation be then? Would it be different?
For PPF?
Yes, for PPF.
So for PPF, post 5 years of contribution, there wouldn't be tax. But before 5 years, it could be fully taxed to you.
Okay, before 5 years, fully taxed. All right, okay. So we have plenty of questions, actually, so many queries coming through as well. So we'll do one thing. We will take a quick commercial break on that note. But Chirag, stay with us, and our viewers as well. If you have any queries, write into us on Smart Money. We'll be back in a jiffy. Welcome back, folks. You're still watching Smart Money on CNBC TV 18. This week, we are discussing retirement planning, and Chirag Muni of Anand Rathi has been speaking to us, very helpfully telling us what one should be doing to have a healthy retirement corpus. Chirag, we spoke about what one should do at 40, 50 and 60 to plan for retirement. But now, what about those people who've already retired and are sitting on a big corpus? What should their investments look like?
I think, Sonia, that's a very good question. I have seen several retired investors, complicating the whole financial plan because there are several products in the market that lure you in terms of getting regular incomes. I feel at the age of 60, when you're already retired and you have a corpus, I think you have to just simplify your life by creating two buckets. One bucket, which I call as the consumption bucket, and the second bucket is the growth bucket. Because since you already have some corpus, what you just need to do is first determine what is my current expenses. Let's say my current expense is about 15 lakhs a year. Create a buffer of consumption basket for 3 years. So 15, 15, 15, 45 lakhs can be created as a consumption basket. Add another 15 lakhs to it so that if there is any contingency or any exigencies that you would require, you can use that bucket. So about 60 lakhs can be set aside if that's your expense as the consumption basket. And the rest of the money, you need to let it grow at the pace which is much higher than inflation. So let me explain. So consumption basket that you had, that money can go in very liquid funds or short-term funds or low duration funds, which will not give you more than 3 to 5% returns in the current interest rate regime. You can have a systematic withdrawal from there. And the rest of the investment basket, which I mentioned, which is the growth basket, that can have a 60-40 split between 60% equity mutual funds, again, 8-10 good funds, and the 40% debt could be a mix of little longer duration funds, like your banking PSU funds or your medium-term funds or dynamic bond funds. Because if you have this split, that money can grow at 10%, which is much higher than the rate of inflation, and you're not disturbing the overall long-term growth. So for a 3.5 year period, you have consumption for yourself, and then post which you can easily rebalance your portfolio again back to your consumption portfolio. So I think that just keeps your life very simple, and you're not disturbing the core portfolio, which can grow at a higher pace. So these are the two baskets I would suggest that most investors can do.
Okay, that's very helpful for people who have already retired. But a question that we get asked a lot by retired folks is that I'm cash poor but asset rich. So people have property, they have gold, but they don't have enough cash to sustain for day-to-day living post-retirement. What is your advice to them?
Correct. So I think, again, that's a very good question. We've seen several people, of course, while taking care of our lifetime goals, while the time they retire, they are left with very little, corpus or no corpus at all. But of course, they have a house of their own, then they should not worry. Because there's a very popular concept globally. Of course, in India, it's there since 2007, but not very well accepted, or people are not well educated about it, to my guess. So that's called reverse mortgage. Now, reverse mortgage is exactly the opposite of mortgage. What you do is you have your own self-occupied house. You go to a bank, mortgage is held with the bank, and they will value your house, basis which they will sanction a loan by which they will give you certain lump sum, and they will keep giving you annuity till the time you live. Now, the good part is you can enjoy the house till the time you are living. After the bank still gives the choice to the legal heirs to pay back what all you have drawn from them and take back the house. Or if the legal heirs don't do that, or they don't want to do that, then the bank sells the house. And the good part is, if there is any residual still left after recovering their interest and charges, that money is also giving back to the legal heir. So that's a very popular concept where you can utilize your house, enjoy your house till their last day, and yet you can have a regular income that you can earn out of it. And if you don't want to live off your, your parent, your children, or you don't have enough corpus, then this is a very good concept to go for. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that if you're in a tier 1 city where the real estate prices have gone through the roof, then you have a choice where you can still have a more comfortable life by using reverse mortgage. If you have a choice, move to a tier 2 city which is very nearby. Of course, you'll have your choice in terms of all your medical facilities. Everything should be available, maybe some relatives. So if you can move to a tier 2 city, your living expenses go down. So you sell your current house at a reasonable value. You use half of that corpus to buy another house in tier 2 city, so that you have 50% of the money as a corpus with you, so that you can utilize that corpus. And you can even put that tier 2 city under reverse mortgage, a tier 2 house under reverse mortgage, so that you still get a regular income out of it. So there are several options, and we should not get bogged down. As long as you have a house, that's not a worry. So reverse mortgage is a very good concept to at least look for.
It's very interesting that you point this out, Chirag, because I don't know anybody in India, in my personal capacity, who has reverse mortgaged their house. It's not a very popular concept in India, right? I mean, is that because it is daunting for a retired person, or is it like a very complicated process? Are there a lot of tax implications? Why has it not picked up pace in India yet?
No, so in fact, a very good question, Sonia, because actually it is completely tax-free because it's in the form of loan that is coming to you. So there is no tax to you, number one. Why is it not picked up in India? I think it's maybe the mindset that we still have, that we need to leave some legacy behind us for our children. This is the last resort of putting mortgage of your house. But, if you've not been able to have some kind of corpus, it's rather you utilize your house in the right fashion and use this concept, then to, find out that where will that extra income come from, or at that age you'll have to work extra to get some bit of income. So I think this is a good concept. The interest rates is slightly higher than the current interest rate regime. But I think in today's interest rate regime, where home loans you get as low as 6.8, 6.9, I think the interest on this would be about 8%. So I think it's still a matter of education, matter of mindset. I think it'll pick up over the period of time. That's my belief.
Okay, yes, it is a matter of mindset, right? Final question then, just coming back to that first plate, and if we can get it up on the screen, the amount that you need to invest in order to have a large corpus of around 9.2 crores when you reach your retirement age. At the age of 40, you invest about 1.2 lakhs. At the age of 45, you invest about 1.5 lakhs. And at the age of 50, you invest 2 lakhs per month. And you can safely create a corpus of around 9.5 crores if you start at 40, 6.5 crores if you start at 45, and about 4.5 crores if you start at 50. So, just to give us a couple of mutual funds, for the benefit of our viewers, the top 2 equity funds, the top 2 debt funds that your house is recommending right now?
So we don't have a top 2, we have a portfolio approach, but let me, for the sake of the viewers, give you certain names. So Mirae Asset Large Cap Fund and the Axis Blue Chip Fund is what we are recommending on the large cap category. In the mid cap category is the DSP Mid Cap Fund. And we have certain flexi cap funds, which is the Can Rebeco and the HDFC Flexi Cap. These are a few funds that I can name on the equity side. On the debt side, again, it's a portfolio, a mix of PSU funds. So you have the HDFC Banking PSU Fund. You have certain dynamic bond funds, which is the ICICI All Season Fund, Kotak Dynamic Bond Fund. These are the 2 funds. You can have a Nippon Short Term Fund and an SBI Medium Term Fund. You have a mix of 20% each on each of these funds, and that can target about 6 to 7% over a long-term period.
Okay, all right. We have many questions that are coming through, but unfortunately, we've completely run out of time. Chirag, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for simplifying the retirement process for us, for making it, making us understand what are the key nuances, especially the tax implications. And I hope that our viewers benefit from them and start their retirement planning early. Thanks a lot for joining us, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Smart Money. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you once again next week.